Go ahead and call the Senate to order. Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President?
For this session number 2, afternoon session, we are very, very pleased to have Chaplain Chris Jensen, who we know quite well and has been here many a times, is part of the Legislative Prayer Caucus, is here on Wednesday mornings, is from Denton, Maryland, and is guest of the distinguished senator from the 37th District. Please rise for the invocation.
Happy spring. Those of you who are familiar with the Lord's Prayer may recognize some of what I'm about to say. Heavenly Father, you are more than holy, more holy than we can imagine, and yet you hear us. We've done a good job of spoiling your plans for us and for this world. Help us to understand how to correct the mistakes we've made and the desire to put those corrections into effect. You've given us what we need to live. Help us to use our surplus to meet the needs of our brothers and sisters who are in need. Forgive us our many shortcomings, but only to the same degree that we forgive those we think have in some way wronged us. Protect us from the evil one, but even more, protect us from ourselves. This is your world. You are all-powerful. All credit for what is good in it goes to you, while we must take the responsibility for the way we mistreat both it and those who live in it with us. Help us to see others with the love with which you see them. Grant wisdom and understanding to the members of this Senate, and give them the courage to do what is right in your eyes without being swayed by changeable opinion. Let these good senators be known for doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with both God and our fellow man. Echoing the words of the Apostle Paul to the Ephesians, I ask God from the wealth of his glory to give you power through his Spirit to be strong in your inner selves. And I pray that he will make his home in your hearts through faith. I pray that you may have your roots and foundation in love, so that you, together with all God's people, may have the power to understand how broad and long, how high and deep is God's love. Yes, may you come to know his love, although it can never be fully known, and so be completely filled with the very nature of God. To him who by means of his power working in us is able to do so much more than we can ever ask or even think of, to God be the glory for all time, forever and ever. Amen.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask that the Senate journalize the remarks of Pastor Jensen. Pastor Jensen is a four-term former Caroline County State's Attorney. 23 years ago, he made the decision to follow a higher calling, and he came to Annapolis and has served as the General Assembly's chaplain. He operates or ministers our prayer breakfast. He's also a liaison to the National Prayer Breakfast gathering in Washington, where national parliaments in the Baltic and Scandinavian countries, where he has helped many of them organize their own parliamentary prayer groups and national prayer breakfasts. He's an enormous figure back home in our district. It's an honor to have him, and I'd very much appreciate if we could journalize his remarks.
Certainly, without objection, we will journalize the pastor's wonderful remarks and thank him for his consistent engagement. Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could echo also, I want to thank the good chaplain, the good friend, the good brother that prays for everybody in here. And he does that all the time. He has a great heart, and I thank him for the knowledge in the Word, but also for his friendship. And I thank him also taking the lead for the 31st for our legislative prayer breakfast. We now have more than 50 people that are coming, and I think we'll have more than that. So I want to thank everybody, and I hope everybody will come at the Calvert House, the 31st, 7:30. It's free. We can get a head count. Appreciate it. I promise you one thing. You get your money back if you don't enjoy yourself. Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellent. All right. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence in the chamber? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is again in session. Any introductions? Any introductions? Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, with me on the floor this afternoon is my friend and retired Carey School of Law professor, Karen Zupansky. She is super smart and has served around the state and around the world, bringing her expertise, and she has been one of my key partners on my 8 election bills this session. And so I wanted to give her a chance to watch us in action, so please welcome her.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. Great to see you. All right. Chair recognizes the senator from Howard and Montgomery counties.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, in one of the balconies is one of my legislative interns, Maddie Montgomery. She's a senior at Glen Elk High School and has begun working for our office last year through the Gifted and Talented program, where she's studying bipartisanship. After graduating, she plans to study history at either the University of British Columbia or William & Mary. So please give her a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Welcome. All right. Any further introductions? Further introductions? If not, so we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. Let's start with message from the House. This is message number 18. Clerk, read the bills.
House Bill 9, Delegate Ruth, Equity in Transportation Sector Guidelines and Analysis, Finance.
Majority Leader moves so we consider the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committee. Report number 19. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 10, Delegate Adams, Correctional Officers Retirement System, Talbot County, Budget and Taxation. House Bill 11, Delegate Stewart, Private Well Safety Act of 2023, Education, Energy, the Environment.
Just one moment. I think that was 19.
I reversed. House Bill 261, Delegate Carr, Public Projects, Procurement of Construction Materials by Clean Maryland Act, Budget and Taxation.
Majority Leader moves so we consider the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committees. Number 20, clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 10, Delegate Adams, Correctional Officers Retirement System, Talbot County, Budget and Taxation. House Bill 11, Delegate Stewart, Private Well Safety Act of 2023, Education, Energy, the Environment.
Majority Leader moves so we consider the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their standing committees. We've got a laid over bill. This is layover bill calendar number 27. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 552, the President Family Prosperity Act of 2023. Question is on the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable report.
All right. Question is on the 2 committee amendments. Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Mr. President, I have an amendment to offer, which I know it's not the appropriate time. The floor leader and I were discussing. I was hoping it might be friendly eventually, but I have a feeling it's not going to be considered friendly. I did wonder if I could just clarify to be sure that I'm correct about something before we adopt the amendments. Could I ask the floor leader
Will
to
the floor leader yield?
questions?
Senator
Give
may
him a chance
proceed.
to- Give him a chance to sit down. Yeah, thing. So this is an expansion of the earned income tax credit, which is I think has been a very strong bipartisan thing in the past that we support. But this is going to continue what was a temporary policy of allowing for people who are not here legally in the country to also receive this taxpayer-funded benefit, correct?
Those who are working and paying taxes in the United States.
Okay, but it does not allow, so folks who are not currently following our laws would be able to get this, correct?
It does not distinguish related to immigration status. It distinguishes based on working and paying taxes.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Mr. President, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll wait for us to adopt the favorable report.
All right. On the amendments, any discussion? If not, any objections to the 2 amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Senator Minority Whip has an amendment. The pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Give us just a moment to get it up on the board here. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this would be I would be a co-sponsor of this bill without this particular issue. In spite of the fact that we know that immigration is a federal issue largely, our state has continued the practice over the years of doing pretty much everything we can to incentivize people to come here illegally. And the argument against this amendment, so I'll tell you what the amendment will do, will simply strike out that if you're not a taxpayer of lawful status in the United States, if you're not lawfully here, you would not be able to benefit from this program. The Earned Income Tax Credit is something that has been a very great tool for dealing with helping to lift people out of poverty and give people resources that they need. But there is a point where we continue to do more and more to incentivize people to come here and focus on Maryland to come, and there's a cost to having folks here and having large populations here of people who are not in the country legally. And so I think this bill would be a stronger bill, a better bill, and one I could vote for and support if we could adopt this amendment that would just simply make it clear that you must be lawfully present in the United States, as well as being a taxpayer lawfully present in the United States to receive this benefit. So I would move my amendment, Mr. President.
All right, the senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Yeah, the senator is very friendly, but the amendment is not. We're talking about people who work and pay taxes. People who work and pay taxes in Maryland are contributing to the economy for all of us. The state does not make immigration law. I understand the principal debates over immigration law, and those are appropriate for the federal level. This is about cutting taxes for Maryland residents, or continuing to keep taxes down as we cut them 2 years ago. This is all about tax relief for working families, and I oppose the amendment.
All right. Any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Number one, I'd like to have a roll call on this vote for this amendment. But let me just speak to this. What we're doing when we subsidize and incentivize illegal immigration and folks to come here illegally to locate in our area is we're incentivizing people to be taken advantage of. People who should not be working if they're here illegally. It's against the law for them to be employed if they're here in the country illegally. So what happens is quite often those folks are working in jobs that may very well exploit them. So that's not good either. And so again, I just want to move the amendment and say let's make this about people who have followed the rules, are here legally, or are citizens, and have this benefit be for them. And so I would move the amendment and again ask for a roll call, Mr. President.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to explain their vote? Chair, the floor leader has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Yeah, I'd just like to explain my vote. As the child of an immigrant and a representative of significant immigrant communities in my district, I just want to reiterate that these are hardworking people. People are not coming to Maryland because of our tax code. When they leave their country, they don't even know what the Maryland tax code is. They come here because America is a great country. It's the best country in the world. It's for the opportunity to live in freedom, practice their religion, and have an opportunity to get their families ahead. It's a good idea, not a bad idea, to make sure that those working Marylanders get a tax cut. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 552 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right. We've got a report. Actually, let's do this message. This came in. This is a message from the House, number 21. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 158, Howard County Delegation, Howard County Alcoholic Beverage Licenses, Residency Requirements, Howard County 11-23, Finance Committee.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committees. Let's do the report from the Committee on Judicial Proceedings. This is report number 22. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 580, Senator Elfreth, Public Safety Officer and Community Wellness Training Grant Fund, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right, Chair recognizes the senator from District 4, as the floor leader.
My apologies, Mr. President. Senate Bill 580. As amended, this bill establishes the Officer and Community Wellness Training Grant Fund, a special fund administered by the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services to provide grants to local law enforcement agencies for mental health, first aid, for public safety training, and critical incident stress management, peer support training for fiscal 2025 and each fiscal year thereafter. The Governor may include in the annual budget bill an appropriation of at least $1 million for the fund. The bill establishes related reporting requirements and would take effect July 1st of 2023. There are two committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the appropriation language in the bill. The bill was moved favorable out of committee, and I move to adopt the favorable amendment committee report and amendments.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 580 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, next we will take up the report from Budget and Taxation. Tiny little bill. This is report number 20, and after the clerk reads the bill, we'd ask the chairman to please come up to the front to present the budget.
House Bill 200, the Speaker, Budget Bill Fiscal Year 2024, favorable with 38 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the Senate, the Budget and Tax Committee has completed its review of the state operating budget for fiscal 2024. Today, we report our version of House Bill 200, the Budget Bill, and House Bill 202, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, otherwise known as the BRFA. Mr. President, I will discuss the actions that the Budget and Taxation Committee took on the budget this year. After that, I will ask that both the budget and the BRFA be laid over, and if I understand the schedule correctly, laid over until this evening's session. And then this evening, I will in turn move that it be special ordered till Wednesday, March 22nd for a second reader debate. Got that right. Before I describe the budget, I would first like to thank all the members of the committee, our amazing committee staff, and the amazing budget staff at DLS. Our work couldn't be completed without their efforts. The needs of our state are wide and varied, from ensuring that we have safe neighborhoods and adequate health care, to helping people stay in their homes and providing our youth with meaningful programs and a quality education. When we arrive each January, it's our job to make decisions that will impact the lives of the people in our state for the better. Despite spending about $1 billion less in general funds than the year prior, the fiscal 2024 budget reported out of the Budget and Taxation Committee addresses the needs of our communities and invests wisely for the future. Through strong collaboration and partnership with the new administration and our colleagues in the House, we present a budget that provides over $8.7 billion in state support for our public schools. We are providing significant compensation enhancements and staffing increases to support our state employee workforce and ensure adequate delivery of services. We are continuing to invest in the social programs that support the most vulnerable populations, increasing rates for our service providers, and including $76 million to enhance the state's behavioral health system. We also agreed with the House on the realignment of over $800 million in funding for legislative priorities, including a $300 million investment in future costs for implementing education reforms. Recognizing that the Senate of Maryland has some differences of opinion on how to balance all of our state's priorities, the budget before this body increases the amount of funds set aside for our future transportation infrastructure needs and provides $35 million in additional funding to support statewide emergency response services and trauma care facilities. We also added $205 million in additional spending for targeted priorities to support the organizations implementing the many programs that make our state great, make our state a great place to live. We provide funds to feed the hungry, help end health care related wait lists, support the cultural arts and our natural environment. And those are just to name a few. Finally, it's worth noting that our actions free up over $240 million in capacity to fund our capital priorities when we take up House Bill 201, the capital budget. Mr. President, I'm proud of the many things we've been able to accomplish in this budget and the lives that we were able to impact. I can also say that we are providing this support with a budget that continues to adhere to sound fiscal policies. Despite having to absorb a $500 million revenue write-down, our work on the budget leaves a $500 million in general fund balance and $2.5 billion in the rainy day fund. We've met all the spending affordability committee goals, including leaving a structural surplus of $145 million. This is a budget that addresses our concerns and positions us well for the future. Mr. President, let me turn to the materials which have been distributed to each member's desk. First, the materials relating to the budget bill. The report of the Budget and Taxation Committee explains each amendment to the budget. Amendments are numbered in the report and in the committee reprint of the bill. The report includes adjustments to funding, budget bill language, and committee narrative listed by state agency. Keep in mind that committee narrative items are not amendments to the bill and are not subject to floor action. However, if you have concerns with narrative items, please bring them to the attention of the committee. The committee reprint of the budget bill reflects the committee's amendments to the budget. Amendments to the budget are numbered and correspond to the explanations in the committee report. Keep in mind that amendments to the budget are to be drawn to the committee reprint and that the rules for offering an amendment to the operating budget have changed. Amendments must be provided to the committee 24 hours in advance of being offered, and proposed additions to the budget must include an identified offsetting reduction. Staff and the amendment officer are available to assist you. Both the report and the budget reflect the actions of the House. Actions that are struck through represent items where we did not agree with the House. New actions adopted by our committee are shown in italics. A summary document is included in your packet, which contains exhibits and charts relative to both the budget bill and the BRFA. The analysis of the Maryland executive budget prepared by the Department of Legislative Services is available to you on your laptops through the floor system and to the public on the internet. The analysis describe the significant budgetary changes in all agencies and provide an overview of the budget as submitted. Mr. President, I move that the House Bill 200 and the committee amendments lie over under the rules until the appropriate hour later this evening, the evening session.
All right, the chair's motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will lie over under the rule. And I'm going to reiterate the chairman's point about the new rules. So please make sure to connect with the committee for floor amendments. This is the first year under question 1, and we have a new Senate rule around the issuance of amendments, offsetting cuts. We need to make sure it's balanced. So just want to make sure that we reiterate that, and it'll be the first time for all of us. But I think it will go well, and appreciate the work of the chairman. So with that, we will now move on to the BRFA. The clerk will read. Oh, well, one moment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll wait. Is there an action that needs to be taken to bring that up?
We will lay this one over. Our wonderful clerk will do it from afar, potentially.
And
All
with
right.
that, likewise, I move that House Bill 202 and the committee amendments lie over the rules until this evening's session.
All right, the chairman has moved that the amendments, the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report will lay over under the rule. The motion is in order, and they will be laid over to the appropriate time this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Onwards we go with the budget. All right. We have one additional piece, one additional calendar. All right, this is special order calendar number 38. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 617, Senator Heddleman, Maryland Transit Administration Fair Price Requirements, Alterations. Question is on the adoption of the favorable report.
All right, question is on the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing, yes. Chair recognizes the minority leader has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Get me one of those, please, just in case. Thank you.
All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As we discussed this morning, the bill before us deals strictly with the fares for our transit system, and the legislation has looked at what the General Assembly has done in the past, in which they tied the fare increases or future fare increases into the CPI. We had some conversation about it, and again, the effect that this would have on the Transportation Trust Fund, but obviously we can see that this bill is moving forward. So the amendment before you essentially does the same thing, however, with the motor fuel tax. So to refresh everyone's memory, back in 2013, the General Assembly passed legislation that would tie the motor fuel tax to the inflation or the CPI. So each year the inflation would be determined. The motor fuel tax could go up to a cap of 8% based on the CPI. If there's no growth in the CPI or it remains unchanged, the fuel tax remains the same. So this amendment would do the same thing back, would roll back that automatic increase that we've had, the same way that Senate Bill 617 does with the fares for Metro or for mass transit, and put the onus back on the General Assembly to come back, and if the fuel tax needs to be raised, that the General Assembly could do that as well. Again, 617 has the ability for the MTA to raise fares through public hearing. This amendment doesn't suggest that, but rather suggests that, again, that the General Assembly could do that if that's what's necessary. So, Mr. President, with respect to that, I think the bill may have been heard, or some form of this bill may have been heard in the same committee, but I think it's important that we are somewhat equitable as far as what we're doing with the fare box recovery and the fares for mass transit with the fuel tax. If changes need to be made, I think it's upon the General Assembly to do such, and I ask that the amendment be moved favorably and request a roll call vote.
All right, senators, move the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I thank my colleague from the Eastern Shore for sharing the amendment with me. I would urge the body to reject this amendment. I appreciate the stress on all of us. I filled up my car on the way here from Baltimore County this morning, and it was a gut punch. I mean, I get it, and I know our constituents get it too. But I also want to remind you that this would have an enormous impact on this really important document. This is our Consolidated Transportation Program. This is a 6-year program. And it is incredibly important to our roads, to our bridges, to our infrastructure. And the impact of decoupling the CPI from the gas tax would have a tremendous impact on this 6-year program. Now, a number of years ago, well, actually last year, we had a 30-day gas tax freeze. And prior to that, Governor Hogan decoupled. But what he did then is he backfilled in both of those instances to make sure that all of these transportation programs that are so important to us and our constituents and our districts were not affected by it. This proposal does not include that. Because we had a bill on this, I know how much this would cost. This would cost nearly $600 million, which is an enormous impact and effect on all of our infrastructure programs. In contrast, the MTA, what we're doing through this bill, 617, is much, 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 much smaller. It would have a much smaller impact on and actually, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because of the disproportionate impact that fares have on MTA users. 80% of the users are bus riders, and more than half of them earn less than $25,000 a year. So right now, those fares are being disproportionately shouldered by the lowest income folks among us. So out of equity reasons and because of the tremendous impact, the tremendous negative impact this would have on all of the transportation programs that we have over the next 6 years, I would urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
All right, question is on the amendment. Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to rise in support of the amendment. Recently this body has taken a couple stances. One was on the minimum wage. We decided that despite the request of the original bill from the governor that we weren't going to tie those increases to the CPI. Also, the bill we're talking about addresses, we're not going to do it with this bill unamended. And the third point, when we talk about loss of revenue or income from this and how it's going to negatively affect our transportation projects, I think maybe we need to look a little harder, maybe look outside the box at some other revenue sources such as our electric vehicles. As we have through our climate policy that we're moving forward, there's going to be more and more electric vehicles on the road. So maybe we can offset that with some sort of registration fee increase like other states are doing to help offset your concern. So I would encourage the body to let's maintain some consistency here with what we're doing with these other two priorities that I mentioned, and vote green on this amendment. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the maker of the amendment take a question or two?
Yes.
Here. Senator may proceed.
Thank you. You mentioned that the groundwork for this was laid in 2013, and that was before I was a member of the Maryland General Assembly. So I was trying to better understand those constituents who are contacting me saying, what's the deal with the automatic gas tax? How did this come about? And, trying to hold the Maryland General Assembly responsible. And I just wanted to understand how that went from 2013 and when these automatic gas tax increases went into effect.
Well, again, I think I was over in the House at the time when this bill came up, but there was notable debate about the fact that this was an automatic increase rather than the General Assembly having to come back in each time. And I think that was something that, I would say maybe leadership wanted to keep members from having to vote for an increase of the gas tax every year. But again, as I mentioned this morning, subsequently, we took the fare box recovery, which is what this piece of legislation is about, and in a sense made it that we were not going to tie that in to increases anymore. And interestingly enough, with the fare box recovery, you would think that in trying to have the amount of money that came in manage the operations of the transit system, it very distinctly says that you cannot decrease any of the operations in order to try to get that to balance out. So we were going down this spiral where fares were never going to be enough to fund the operations of transit. So now what we've seen is a number of pieces of legislation. Again, it got tied into the CPI back in 2015, but we have not seen an increase from that. We've not seen the fare, any type of increases in the fare, and we're now getting to the point where just eliminating the CPI is very similar to what this amendment would do for the gas tax. Again, if the fares need to go up, then the General Assembly should come back and make those decisions. The same with the gas tax. We should have the gas tax in place, not an automatic increase. Again, it doesn't go down. It doesn't, I mean, if inflation goes down or inflation is even, there is no decrease in the gas tax. It can simply only go up as a matter of the 2013 legislation. So I think the important part then becomes, should those of us that are here making the decisions be responsible to the people that elect us and our constituents? If it's important that the gas tax goes up to fund Transportation Trust Fund, then let's all sit in here and make that decision. But let's not push that decision to some type of formula and let that make the decisions for us.
So one follow-up question. From the standpoint of our constituents, this would be a matter of fairness of what we're doing here and what we would do to eliminate the automatic gas tax increase.
I would agree that it puts both those that pay the gas tax and those that pay for fares on transit systems on par with each other, that neither will go up automatically, that they would only both go up if decisions are made either by the General Assembly or by the MDTA or MTA.
Thank you. You've answered my questions. I rise in very strong support of this amendment. I've been looking at some of the constituent emails that I've been receiving about what our constituents are struggling with, especially with the skyrocketing gas costs. This is a matter of fairness, so I'm pleased to cast a yay vote for this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th on the amendment. As the senator is rising, interesting point, I was just trying to think. There were only 7 of us in the body today that were there when we did this, which is hard to believe. Yeah. Yeah. So. Senator from the 37th. Not including the House. Not including the House.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to stand up and offer some words of support for this amendment. It's an important amendment. Transportation funding has been a huge problem for the Eastern Shore for years, dating back to the O'Malley administration with the trust fund. You know, we did the Transportation Equity Act earlier today, and all points are leading towards mass transit right now. And those areas of Maryland that are still trying to recover from the Transportation Trust Fund, they need all the help they can get. They are 10 to 15 years behind in projects. Doing something with the gas tax to put it on parity will only serve to help. And it's just an important issue, and I wanted to make sure to at least provide some support from our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader. Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I ask the floor leader to yield for one question? May I ask?
The floor leader, yes. Yes, Senator may proceed.
Thank you. Could you just remind the body and confirm what I believe to be true, that the gas tax payers are already heavily subsidizing the mass transit system. Is that correct?
They contribute to the Transportation Trust Fund. Motor fuel taxes due to the tune of 22% of the Transportation Trust Fund.
So gas tax alone is 22%.
Correct, the motor fuel tax. But a lot of different revenue sources go into making the Transportation Trust Fund.
Understood. Is gas tax the largest, or one of the maybe 2 largest percentage-wise?
Federal assistance is the first largest.
Of course.
And that is the second. It is.
Okay. And then if I might follow up with the same question a little bit differently. So I said one question, so it's 2. But the fare box. So what's our percentage of the fare box going into Transportation Trust Fund?
Well, this is registrations and MBA fares.
Okay.
Fees is about 11%.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President, 2 points, if I might. One is those that pay gas tax right now heavily subsidize our entire transportation system, not just the roads. certainly that goes to roads. And frankly, one of the real legacies of the last 8 years is a return to the idea that gas tax funds should be used first and primarily for roads. Obviously, mass transit subsidization is certainly something that is a reality, and would have to do some subsidizing to be able to afford these big systems. But what's happened is with this automatic gas tax increase is a tremendous punishment on the people who we're depending on to help pay for the things we all agree are obviously in metro areas. We want to have transit options for moving people. It's also better for drivers on the roads. But the reality is we never get to the point where the fare box already comes close to covering the cost of these systems at all. So that's the first point, and it's why this is an issue of fairness, to get back to a place where we're accountable as senators and state delegates on the other side of the hall here. We're accountable to make the tough decision to raise taxes, raise gas taxes. That's what it should be. And this CPI it allows us to just absolve ourselves of that responsibility. So in a way, I love the idea of repealing CPI that's in this bill. That's why we need to do it for the gas tax. Number two, we heard about that it's going to cost all this money. It's going to cost all this money. Automatic increases are the state does not have a right to those to automatic increased dollars. That assumes that you're going to get that money in the future. That's future money. We're not taking money from the fund now. We're saying we're not going to continue making incremental moves forward, and as we saw, with inflation, it can cause the gas tax to go up pretty far in a year. So this is a good amendment, and I had urged the body to adopt it. And I don't know if we asked for a roll call, but I definitely would like to have a roll call, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Chair recognizes the Chair, Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I would recommend we strongly oppose this amendment. Believe it or not, I actually appreciate this discussion, and I think it's one that we need to have. It's one that we need to have over the next year or two. The gas tax itself is not going to be enough, quite frankly, because of the nature of the new vehicles, to accommodate all the needs that we have. This is a critical problem. And it's one that I've been talking about, the committee has been talking about for the last couple of years. We've got to take some action, and I believe there are going to be some tough decisions ahead of us. So I appreciate the beginning of this discussion. This discussion is going to continue, actually, with the bill that we have before us. The Garvey bill that was brought up earlier has a component part in it. We decided to embed in it a study of our transportation system and the funding of our transportation system. It's got to be done. We've got to do it, and we're going to have to make tough decisions. I think this is the wrong timing for this type of amendment. I think it's more appropriate that we bring that up in the totality of it all. You might say, well, why is it you have this bill before us? Well, the bill is small in comparison in terms of the dollar values and the impact on our overall transportation system. The gas tax and what we do beyond that is the real money, and it's where we're going to have to make those tough decisions. So I would ask that you reject this amendment, and I look forward to this discussion as we move forward, and we have this blue ribbon panel that we hope to conform shortly. It's a big deal, and I look forward to working with you all on it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Chair in explaining his vote. The reason I mentioned the 7 is because the deal around indexing also came at the same time as the transportation lockbox. And there was a one and the other, that we wouldn't take transportation dollars to plug holes in the general fund. What's happened now is we flipped, where this year in the budget, which was very well done by the Budget and Tax Committee, we're taking about nearly $400 million of general funds to subsidize transportation on the other side. That was never how it was envisioned. The transportation lockbox was to protect transportation expenditures. This is going to be a very, very real and hard conversation moving forward, and I appreciate the comments from the chair, because we have got to figure this out. Every state has to figure this out. We are on the precipice, and we have incredible infrastructure. This is not the right vehicle to figure it out, but we will have to take it up this term. So with that, the clerk will take the call. With 27 votes, the senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 617 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we have a report from the Committee on Budget and Taxation. This is report number 19. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 350, Senator King, Early Childhood Development Child Care Scholarship Program funding, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 350, as amended, requires MSDE to provide notification to the General Assembly before altering the scholarship benefits and prohibits the department from implementing the changes before the end of the following legislative session unless there is a need for the Board of Public Works to make mid-year reductions to the budget. There are 2 committee amendments. First one is technical. The second one strikes the provisions that would have made the program an entitlement at the current benefit levels and otherwise makes the changes as I already described. I move adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 350 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 452, Senator Griffith, Income Tax, Film Production, Activity Tax Credit Alterations, favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 452 alters the film production activity tax credit by first expanding eligible film productions to include a documentary or talk or reality game show. 2, expanding eligible costs to include specified salaries, wages, and other compensation. 3, increasing the amount of eligible costs that qualify for a tax credit certificate by 3 percentage points. And 4, increasing the annual amount of credits the Department of Commerce may award to $25 million in fiscal 2025 through 28. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment 1 adds sponsors and makes changes to the title and purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 authorizes tax credits to increase to $25 million for fiscal years 25 through 28 and establishes a Maryland Entertainment Council to assess Maryland's competitiveness in film, television, and entertainment industry. Move adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 452 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 621, Senator Zucker, Gaming, Sports Wagering, Independent Evaluation of Sports Wagering Content, favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, colleagues. Senate Bill 621, as amended, allows entities to partner in a way with the State Lottery and Gaming Control Commission for content advertisement to make sure that it's being vetted. What we've seen in other states is that people are doing ads and advertising and may not be as forthright, but this just allows different entities throughout the state to partner with the State Lottery and Gaming Commission to make sure their content is acceptable, and it also makes technical changes to the title and other purpose paragraphs. And there's another amendment that just allows the Sports Wagering Application Review Commission to consider a request to amend past license. As amended, there's no opposition to this bill. I would move the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rising is the senator from Carroll County, if it's okay, in this specific instance, because there's a personal concern that I have. So is this going to evaluate advertising? Is this going to evaluate how the advertising impact has on people getting captured that have issues with gambling as well? Or is this mostly just focusing on how they're being presented. I mean, can you elaborate?
Yeah, it's more the latter. This is making sure that those that are doing advertising, that are publicizing bets and ratios and all that, are in not accredited but licensed, and that they're being evaluated through this the gaming, the State Lottery and Gaming Commission.
Because and correct me if I'm wrong, we have a lot. All of a sudden, any of us that are on anything on our phones, like social media or whatever, I see ads for gaming, gambling, sports gambling all the time now, and I've never placed a bet, so I know it's bombarding people. So we're trying to be sure with this bill that we're not having bad actors that are advertising from out of state that are not following our rules that we've laid out. Correct?
That's the intent. I mean, this really is a consumer protection bill.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Mr. President, I'm just really concerned that sports gaming, it's here to stay. It's going to be a moneymaker for the state. A lot of people enjoy doing it, but there are real concerns and issues with an explosion of, I think we're going to see an explosion of problem gambling. And that's not specifically what this bill is for, but I do think making sure advertisers are following the right rules is really important. So I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I've been trying just to be mindful of people's time. I mean, we're really trying to be out front on this and make sure that we've seen what happens in other states, and we want Maryland to take the lead on this.
Excellent. All right. On the amendments, any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report, as amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 621 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 695, Senator Jennings, State Retirement Pension System, Military Service Credit, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, over the last few years, we've been working very hard to deal with our state pension systems, as well as members of the military that have gone to work for the state. This is a continuation of that. What it does is it allows a member or a former member of the state retirement and pension system to receive service credit at the rate of 4 months for each full year of attendance at a United States Service Academy, those being Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, Coast Guard Academy, and I'm missing one, Merchant Marine. Thank you. Overall, there's a cap of 5 years of military service credit in our current law, and that keeps it there. There were two amendments. The first was a technical clarification, and the second, Mr. President, was a sponsor amendment. A little choked up on that one. So with that, I move favorable on the amendments in the bill.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments of the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Oh, yes, Chair recognizes the senator from Charles County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the floor leader.
Senator may proceed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for this great bill, Senator. And recognizing that there are several other ascension sources for the military, principally, you say, ROTC, which a lot of ROTC programs, the cadets spend 4 years going through extensive program. What's the rationale for not including, say, those who go through ROTC at our university?
Well, I understand it, and I appreciate that question, because when the bill came to me, I asked the same question. Not only ROTC, but anybody who does 4 years in college, then goes to the military. The issue with this was that when I looked at the legislation and put it in, and we narrowly defined it, was with the service academies, their commitment while in the academy is much greater than those who are regularly in college or in a ROTC program. This is the first step. If you want to look at next year, amending this and adding to it, but we just kept it narrowly defined to the service academies.
Right. Yeah, I understand other people go through college and go to officer training course, like call them 13-week wonders. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about those who go in from freshman, full ROTC scholarship per se. They have a commitment throughout their entire 4 years. I just want to focus on that part.
That
instead of drop everybody.
That did not come up in the testimony.
Okay.
We kind of stayed strictly on the service academies. We didn't get into the ROTC program.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator.
All right. Question remains on the two amendments. Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 695 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 766, Senator Carter, Baltimore City, collection of unpaid property taxes. Favorable is two amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City. Is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 766 is a local bill that, as amended, authorizes Baltimore City to divert owner-occupied residential property from private tax sale lane process into an alternative program for payment of taxes and arrears, withhold owner-occupied residential property from tax sale, establish an installment payment program for taxes and arrears on owner-occupied residential property, and subject to specified criteria, conduct an in-rem foreclosure in sale owner-occupied residential property on which taxes are in arrears. There are two amendments, Mr. President. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes, and amendment number 2 limits the bill to owner-occupied residential in-rem process and aligns the notices and judgment requirements with those for in-rem for vacant and nuisance properties. Move adoption of the committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report, as amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 766 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 773, Senator Lamb, state procurement, liquidated damages, policies, and requirements. Favorable two amendments.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a good government, protect the taxpayers bill. One of the things we do a lot is contract out for services from the state government. And sometimes those contractors don't perform as they might. Sometimes there's spectacular problems, sometimes there's small problems. But it's a tradition in contract law to consider having liquidated damages in the contract. So if they screw up and they can't fix it, or they don't fix it, they give you money to help you fix it yourself. There's not a clear pattern of policy across state government about liquidated damages, and the Joint Audit Committee has found many cases in which agencies have not pursued liquidated damages and have been concerned about this. So what this bill does is tell the Board of Public Works, which is our overall state contracting policy-making body, by the end of this year to come up with a statewide policy on what agencies should do on liquidated damages, and then requires the agency to come back to the Board of Public Works by July 1st of next year with their proposed policies. There are two amendments. One is technical, and the other changes how the process would work if an agency in the future decides not to pursue liquidated damages. Move the amendments and the favorable report.
All right, the floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report, as amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 773 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 782, Senator Hester, state procurement, purchasing preferences, compost, mulch, and soil amendments, and recycled aggregate.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 782, as amended, requires the Maryland Green Purchasing Committee to establish specifications for compost, mulch, and other soil amendments to be used by certain units in procurements if the products are competitively priced, are of satisfactory quality, and are readily available. There are two committee amendments. The first makes technical changes. The second amendment strikes the provisions providing for price preferences for certain compost, mulch, or other soil amendments and aggregate, and instead does what I just said it did before. It excludes sludge and adds dredged material and construction waste to the list of materials from which the compost, mulch, or soil amendments may be made. It adds a definition for aggregate to the bill, and it adds a requirement that the products be readily available. I move the two amendments and a favorable adoption of the committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report, as amended, is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 782 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 874, Senator M. Washington, Community Health and Safety Works Grant Program and Fund Establishment.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senate Bill 874 as amended codifies the existing Community Health and Safety Works grant program and establishes a related fund within the Department of Housing and Community Development. The purpose of this program is to provide financial assistance in the form of grants for eligible products that improve the quality of life and economic potential of Maryland communities by making targeted investments in crime prevention strategies. The Department of Housing and Community Development must administer the program and adopt the regulations to carry them out. There's one amendment. The amendment strikes the mandated appropriation and evidence of certain partnerships instead of certain requirements for memorandums of understanding. Move the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment, the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 874 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 907, Senator Salling, Maryland Film Office Entertainment and Film Funding Grant Program Establishment, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 907 established entertainment and film funding grant program in the Department of Commerce and Maryland's Film Office. The program provides grants to qualified productions to assist with the production of cost of entertainment and films projects in the state as those terms are defined. Subject to specific applications required, a grant from the program may go up to $200,000 per project. In fiscal 2025, each fiscal year thereafter, the governor must include the annual budget bill as approximate of $5 million to the office to award grants for the program. There's two amendments. One amendment makes changes to the purpose of the paragraph, and the second is authorized rather than require the governor to include an appropriations for the grant program. Move adoptions of these two amendments in the favorable report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 907 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we're going to do one last report, just the last second reader we have up here, which is Judicial Proceedings, report number 23. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 221, Senator Smith, Court Officials Public Disclosure of Personal Information, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. In these rancorous times, our judges are increasingly the subject of attack. An assassin went to the home of a judge in New Jersey, rang the doorbell, and when the judge's son came to the door, the assassin killed the son. In Montgomery County, an assassin traveled there from the West Coast in order to kill Justice Kavanaugh. This bill authorizes a current or former state or federal judge or prosecutor or an immediate family member of such individual to obtain the removal and non-disclosure of a publicly posted home address or telephone number. The bill authorizes bringing an action for an injunction and or damages against disclosure violations. Additionally, the bill requires a custodian of a public record under the Maryland Public Information Act to deny inspection of the part of a public record that contains the home address or telephone number of a current or former state or federal judge or prosecutor. There are two amendments. The first is technical. The second, at their request, adds the current or former governor and lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland to the persons protected under the bill. This committee that passed our committee favorable with two amendments that I've just described. I hereby move for a favorable vote on the two committee amendments and for a favorable vote on the bill. Thank you.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 221 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, senators, the only thing left on the desk are third readers, which we'll take up tonight. All of our second readers that we have are through. So We'll call it there. We will be back tonight at 7 o'clock. So, Finance Committee, or any committees are there? Nope. Executive noms, F5. Okay, F5 for executive nominations. Any other announcements for the good of the order before we adjourn? If not, let's do a quorum call.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until this evening at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. without objection, so ordered. We're going to keep this. We'll keep the room secure.
Mr. President?
Yes.
We have several different requests for who we're adjourning in honor of, and I've got one to do for now, and I've got another one for the next session.
Yes,
mind?
of course, please.
Okay. Mr. Michael Clay Burnham, a retired Natural Resources Police Officer, life member of the Cobb Island Volunteer Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services, passed away just recently. We'd like to adjourn in his honor tonight.
Without objection, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And have a safe evening, everyone. See you at 7.